Hello and welcome to another episode of Purple Tories. Today I have a returning guest, someone we all enjoy to watch. That's Alice Grant.
Hi. It's good to be back. Thank you for having me, Damien.
You're very welcome. You've done a lot of different things, such as, working with Turning Point and writing in columns and doing things in the Daily Express.
Yes, yeah. In fact, did you see that one of our videos got put up
Yeah,
on the
that's
Daily
right. Yeah, one of the videos from Purple Tories actually made it to the Express. Our small bit of fame we achieved. So what have you been doing lately, and have you been politically active lately very much?
Yes, yeah. I've been really interested to see how everything's going with this whole COVID-19 and the government's response. And it's been really interesting. I've also, of course, been having online school lessons as well every week. Yeah. And I've been going out a lot, actually, to the park, exercising and things. So.
And we just discussed previously that they're going to go by your predicted grades for your school now.
So, yeah, I'm quite happy about that. But
yeah,
I'd still rather be. It's funny because I didn't think I'd miss school, but actually, online lessons are a lot more intense.
What do they use? Google Classrooms or something like that?
They use this thing called Microsoft Teams. It's quite funny, but honestly, I think my teachers are getting more strict just because they think that we'd be more likely to kind of
backing off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what have you been making of the lockdown then in general?
So I'm definitely not in support of the lockdown. I think it's hugely damaging. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's hugely damaging. And in this case, it's not even just weighing up the economy versus COVID-19 itself, but it's actually basically, as Peter Hitchens says, it's lives versus lives. Because we all know that, yes, COVID is extremely dangerous and we must prevent people from getting ill. But the amount of devastation that the economic effects that we're going to incur after this lockdown are going to be so massive, and they are going to affect people. Many people will be in poverty. Many people have lost their jobs. So this is not an ideal situation, and I do not think the government has taken the right steps to protect us from COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I've had to stop my job as an electrician because
that's terrible.
Yeah, because I predominantly work in shops, and obviously all the shops have been closed at the moment. I've heard there's some places, like apparently someone was telling me the other day in the southwest, they do have some shops open, but where I am, I see no shops open. So
yeah, same. And here in London, most of the shops are closed, and these are local small businesses that rely on customers being able to come and buy food from them every day. But, it's no surprise that it's all the big supermarkets that have stayed open, and that they're the ones that are profiting off this the most. These huge, multinational businesses like Sainsbury's and the big corporations that are benefiting off this. And small businesses are going to be hit the hardest. I'm so sorry to hear about your job, by the way. That's really awful.
Well, lucky enough, I managed to get a night shift at a warehouse, and so I do actually have some income coming in. But we have all these schemes like the furlough scheme for people who are in paid employment, and I'm actually qualified as self-employed, even though I'm not really self-employed. It's just the way my taxes are processed. And because I didn't do a tax return last year, because I only became self-employed a few months ago, I actually didn't qualify for any government money whatsoever. And And so if I didn't get this job at the night shift, I would have been in real trouble within a few months paying my bills. So I can't imagine what it's like for the people who were like me but didn't manage to get a job during the lockdown.
Yeah, the thing is, because we're in the transition period still, the EU is actually the one who controls which businesses and which individuals get the emergency coronavirus loan schemes or not. They're the ones, it's their state aid laws that are taking precedence over our laws and our government and what it decides. So as long as this transition period continues as well, and they're wanting to extend it in the EU as well. The longer this continues, the even worse it will be for small businesses, which have already been hit so hard. And I have a friend as well whose father's business has also gone bust. This is devastating for so many people, and it's just not worth it. It's a totally disproportionate reaction to COVID-19, I think.
Well, the government have sent out a lot of money to people who are not in work at the moment with the furlough scheme. Also, they've done business interruption loans, which I actually tried to apply for, but I found out later on that you have to have, I think you had to have some kind of legal framework as if you were like some big company. And it's like not a big company,
I've heard this before, that the application processes are a nightmare. These loan schemes.
The Bank of England governor actually said that it's been chaos. The loans that they're trying to give to small businesses, apparently only about 5% have actually gone to the people who applied for them.
Exactly. This is so awful, and it's not at all okay.
I think the problem is you can't really rely on a government to do schemes like this well, unless you did something more extreme, which I doubt you would support, which would be like Andrew Yang's version, where it's like UBI, where you just send out money to everyone. That you could actually, you could actually do that in a way administratively, which would actually work. But the way they're doing it, you're missing out so many people that it doesn't make sense.
But also something that we need to take into account is, where is this money coming from? Because at the moment, national debt is spiraling out of control, and it's basically our generation. It's my generation that are going to have to deal with these consequences, this mounting debt. And I think that's something to be extremely concerned about, because the government is spending and spending and spending, basically, as Peter Hitchens calls it, gold fairy dust. Where is this coming from? The truth is, it is the taxpayers' money. It's our money. So I just don't.
It's the future young generations, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Did you also see that the furlough scheme has actually been extended to 4 months now?
I know, that's unsustainable. That's completely unsustainable. Honestly, this is just the wrong way of going about these things. And I think we were so excited about this government. We were excited about Rishi Sunak as Chancellor, as Boris as a leader. And honestly, I think that they are disappointing many, many people, including myself. How do you feel about Boris and everything he's doing? I know you were a great supporter.
Yeah. No, I am still a big supporter of the Conservative Party, no matter what. Because I had a discussion with another guest before about this, because even if, bad things like this do happen, it still is the best vehicle I see for delivering conservative values.
Well, I agree. I keep thinking,
okay.
Yeah, no, I keep thinking at least it's Boris and not Keir Starmer or Jeremy Corbyn at this point.
Can you imagine?
I can just picture us like, military tanks crossing the streets, ensuring everyone stays locked up. It could be much worse. So, I guess we have something to be thankful for. But really, this is not really ideal. And I think the civil liberties are a huge part of why I stand so strongly against the lockdown.
I was going to ask that question. Do you see it as a question? Well, you clearly do see it as a question of civil liberty abuse, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, these are our basic freedoms being taken away from us. The freedom to go meet our friends, to go to the pub, to see our family, the freedom to go to work, to worship in church. I haven't been in church now for 7 weeks, and I really would love to go back. This is not okay. This is our freedom to worship being taken away. The freedom to go outside, really, without the police stopping you and telling you to go home like they do in my local park. It's just, this is unacceptable. And the thing is that when the government does get their hands on our civil liberties, almost, usually they never want to give our civil liberties back. So we have to be very careful and very cautious about protecting our freedoms.
And I think you, like me, probably think that corona is overblown as a disease.
You know what? Yeah.
And yeah, it's mostly older people who are at risk, or immunocompromised people, as someone who studied science told me.
Yeah, no.
People who have diseases or conditions previously.
Exactly. And the numbers we're seeing as well probably aren't even accurate. And I've heard this from the government itself, that they're also counting deaths of people who test positive and die, but not of corona. Just testing positive and then dying means that they're counted as corona death. Also, deaths related to COVID, which are people that die of other things but can't receive the hospital care and attention they need because of COVID-19. So people dying with cancer and heart attacks. The truth is, these numbers are also the death rate. The death numbers are really dodgy. And again, if we think back to the flu of 2015 to 2016, 28,000 people died of that flu. And, you know, we're seeing a similar amount of numbers here. And I bet it's basically the same figures.
And we're actually getting people die as well because they're not getting vital operations because they're waiting till the end of lockdown.
Exactly. You know, where do we decide which lives are more important? You know, people dying from cancer or people dying from COVID. COVID should not take precedence over other really serious illnesses. And think about all the people who aren't getting diagnosed right now because they can't visit their GP, or people who aren't getting blood tests, people who aren't getting what they need because of this crazy, overhyped COVID-19, which has basically taken over our NHS and is now destroying it.
Just as a thought experiment, if coronavirus was a more severe illness, say it was like on par with, you know, SARS or, you know, something more dangerous,
or even past pandemics that we've had. You know, like look at Ebola. That was awful.
But say if it was as severe as something like that, would you, if the government then imposed lockdown restrictions because of it being as severe as that, would you see it as an affront to civil liberties in that case?
Yes, of course. Yeah, no matter what, lockdown is not the solution. You can quarantine people who have tested positive, and you can make sure that you protect the elderly or the people who are most vulnerable from whatever it is. But you cannot stop normal people from living their normal everyday lives just because of creating this climate of fear and panic and anxiety. And that is exactly what the government have done, which is why when we eventually return back to normal, this is going to be even harder for them because they've created so much fear that basically going back to normal will be having to admit that they have taken the wrong measures.
You see, I actually do think it's a civil, an affront to civil liberties, like Peter Hitchens says. However, I think if it was more severe and it was a much bigger killer, I would actually support the lockdown more, and I wouldn't see it as an affront to civil liberties. And I had an interesting debate with someone, about someone yesterday, about the exchange of security for civil liberties. And I think that there are certain circumstances where this is appropriate, you know, such as war or something like that. Like the government in America has the ability to force manufacturers to manufacture things in the aid of war.
Yeah, but the thing is that that's a very extreme situation. You know, this is not a war. I know some people want to kind of, you know, overblow the situation and say that this is the new invisible enemy, but really we're dealing with a virus here that's affecting mainly vulnerable older people. This is not another war. And in fact, I guess that's almost offensive to the people who had to live through the 2 world wars and felt the real damage that those brought.
And do you not think if it was a lot more severe, though, there would be a good case for lockdown restrictions? Or do you think that's
no? I would never support lockdown. I care way too much about civil liberties, but also about people's jobs and their wages and the economic effects, and also the mental and physical effects of the coronavirus. We have to, or the lockdown policy. We have to remember not only is, you know, huge amount of livelihoods being lost, and but suicide rates have gone up by something like 8,000% in America, and they're going up here. Domestic abuse is going up because people are staying under house arrest, basically, and that's not okay.
Yeah, I saw a tweet apparently, and there's a doctor in London who says suicides have been up quite a lot recently.
Yeah, of course, because if you lose your job,
there's no official data on it as of yet, but it's not a good sign from when you hear someone like that say something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the social effects of the lockdown and the economic effects are going to be so much worse than just COVID-19 itself. This is
if you actually look at graphs where there's been a recession, it's amazing how much the suicide rate correlates with the recession. It's actually unbelievable how closely they align.
Yeah, poverty and recession always means that deaths go up. So this is something we're going to be seeing the effects for a long time. And as I said, my generation as well are going to have to pay for this debt that the government is creating.
And I think we definitely have to mention this story because I thought it was unbelievable. The UK originally went for a herd immunity strategy. They later played this down. Herd immunity is basically, keep the older people locked up and let everyone just sort of see this thing through and become immune to it by getting it and then becoming immune. The government then did a complete U-turn on this because of studies come out of the Imperial College London.
I have a lot to say about.
I'm sure
Imperial
you do.
College. No, carry on.
And the chief person who was part of the SAGE committee from Imperial College London was this Dr. Neil Ferguson, and he obviously ended up breaking his own lockdown restriction rules by having his girlfriend come see him.
I know, it's just, to be honest, it's not even about the fact that he is obviously breaking the lockdown rules that he advocated for himself, but just if you look at his history of predicting deaths and his dodgy models, they've almost always been wrong. I mean, this is the man who predicted nearly 2 million people dying of avian flu when I think only around 200 people died. He predicted 500,000 deaths of COVID here in the UK. Obviously, that hasn't materialized. In America, millions of deaths. He can't be trusted. And why is our government listening to the advice of this crazy man who's got nearly all of his predictions wrong? And
did you know his girlfriend is an advocate for AVAZ? I think they're called AVAAZ. And this is a group which is an online social, I don't want to say social justice, but they're veering in that territory. And they basically campaign for the end of fossil fuels and things like that. And so for me, if you have someone associated with people like that, that's always a bad sign.
Yeah, of course. No, I think that's one of the most disappointing things, is that the scientists that the government are listening to are obviously not the right people to be listening to. And you can find other scientists and doctors on the web who are saying, who are experts in their field and who are saying that this is the wrong way of going about this, and there are other solutions.
Well, it suggests that they possibly have a political bias and they're doing it for other means other than just scientific ones.
Yeah, no, I think the lockdown was very much a politically motivated decision.
But I think Boris is probably, it's interesting to me because I found out that apparently Dominic Cummings actually said in the SAGE committee that he supported the lockdown and that why aren't we doing it now, closing restaurants and things like that. And, we like to think of Dominic Cummings as the smart one who's kind of our guy in the Conservative government. And so for him to say that, it makes me wonder, why is he saying that,
That's true. And I think if you just look at the speech Boris gave the other day, the truth is that speech, it's not that the language he was using wasn't easy to understand. His phrasing was clear, But the fact that there are so many inconsistencies and contradictions with the government's policy makes it so perplexing for the public. And it also was presented in such a patronizing way with those silly graphs that look like GCSE biology. It was ridiculous. And I think the questions many people are asking themselves is, why are we having our liberties taken away? Why do we have to be under house arrest, basically, while we can hear planes flying overhead that are taking passengers to England who are not being checked at airports, who aren't being quarantined? And moreover, we have also illegal immigrant. We have a crisis going on right now in Dover, and that's not being spoken about either. And this is really worrying and concerning. And the truth is, there are just too many inconsistencies and contradictions with this policy that makes it really confusing.
But the lockdown has actually been hugely popular. What do you make of that?
Honestly, I don't really trust any polls first on the internet, because from what I can see, I haven't really found many people who are happy to be locked up in their house not working.
Well, it's gone down now, but apparently it was as high as 90% at some point previously. It's now dropped to about 70% is what they're saying, which is not as popular, but it's still quite popular. 70% is a big...
I'd find it really hard to believe that that many people are happy. But let's say, for the sake of argument, if that was true, I would just say that this is what happens when you fearmonger a population to such an extent, and you have the media who have been hysterical about COVID-19. And I don't think that citizens living in fear, you can't live in fear, because that's when you give up all your freedoms. And we can't be living, in this climate of being afraid to do our normal activities. It's really worrying.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, for me, is I actually think it's making Boris more popular, especially after...
You think so?
And I
don't know. I just know I know some very strong Boris supporters who are really disappointed in the actions he's taking. These are quite some older supporters.
Are these people who are sort of casually into politics, or people who are more hardcore conservative?
Kind of casually. They're just supporters of the Conservative Party, very passionate about Boris, just normal people who are shocked at, I guess, his lack of leadership, really, because it doesn't look like the government is taking control. It doesn't look, he's not being Churchillian and strong for the nation. It just looks like he's really exhausted. He's being forced to listen to these Imperial College scientists who, quite frankly, don't know what they're doing and have got the numbers almost exclusively wrong. And I don't think he believes in what he's saying either. I mean, if you just look at the video, he doesn't even make sense. In one moment it's, oh yeah, you can go back to work tomorrow, but you can't use public transport, which doesn't make any sense. You can go out to the park and you can play sports, but only tennis. And then you have Matt Hancock saying in another video that you can't hug any new friends, which makes no sense. Which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Because what does that mean about old friends? That doesn't mean they're immune from COVID.
Yeah.
It's just really silly. These are silly rules. And I don't understand how people can be taking them seriously, especially when you can basically have cleaners over at your house. You can't have extended family. It's just a little bit ridiculous.
But I have to say, I do actually think Middle England is broadly quite supportive of what Boris is doing. I think people are a bit frustrated now because they're not seeing an exit strategy here, and I think Boris does need to provide an exit strategy at one point, because
he needs to be more clear and show more leadership.
But I have to say, when I watched the press conference he did, or the recording he did for the public, to be honest, I didn't really listen to a lot of what he said, because I just find the whole coronavirus thing ridiculous. But the way he speaks and how he was telling you how to be alert and the graphs and everything, I did actually find it quite assuring, even though I didn't believe what he was saying.
I thought it was so patronizing.
Yeah.
I thought it was like they're using these graphs, which really did remind me of like GCSE explaining photosynthesis. And, you know, and I don't think that's any way to talk to the public, you know, making us out to be like these little children who need to have their hands held as we slowly, you know, get back to normality. I don't think that's right. I don't know.
My feeling is though he was trying to like speak to the public as if they were smart people and telling them, you know, this is how it is, the alert system and how we're working things, as opposed to keeping them in the dark. And so I feel like that's probably what he was trying to achieve there. But because the message was too mixed, it didn't really come off as well as it should have. And because Boris is Boris, he'll make it even worse, you know.
I just, you know what, I think I kind of miss his old charming, optimistic self. I think that's been lost and I'm quite upset. He used to have some vigor, some positivity, and he just looks genuinely really exhausted.
I think Boris on the whole is a very good politician, but I think in this situation he's just out of his depth. I just think he's not capable of sensible policy when it comes to.
Well, we have to remember this is a relatively infant government in the sense they haven't been doing this for that long. They're a brand new government, and I do in fact feel very sorry for him that this has had to happen. You know, basically as soon as he's in office, as soon as he's been prime minister, this whole COVID thing has happened, and it's basically destroyed, you know, the first couple of years of his premiership, which are going to be stained with economic recession, with a lockdown and a massive loss of civil liberties. And I think, you know, there are things even going on basically outside of the government's control as well, which are making things so much worse. Like the police, who are completely abusing their powers. And it's just this is not a good situation whatsoever.
I think it's good, though, that the government did actually say to the police not to overstep their mark. And so, because Boris, even though, you know, he's imposed these quite draconian rules, he is actually at heart a liberal, I think.
Definitely.
So,
definitely more liberal than a conservative.
But I do believe he's a conservative as well. I just think he's a liberal conservative. To be honest, I don't really see the
he's very, very liberal. I don't think I've ever heard him say something genuinely conservative.
Well, okay, Alan.
He hasn't stood up for anything of the conservative social values. I've never heard him stand up for unborn babies.
But he's done some good things like the points-based immigration system and obviously leaving the EU. Come on, that's like the biggest achievement of them all, right?
Well, we've yet to see if we leave in December with no extension of the transition period. But if he pulls through, I will be impressed. But as it stands, I don't know. There's so much pressure for an extension.
The signs are good, though, because he actually said to the EU that we refuse to God, I can't speak at the moment, extends the process negotiations any longer. And so that is a good sign, I think.
Well, I think, you know, if we are still trapped in the EU, obeying their rules with no voice and with no veto past December, we are going to be liable for the bailout of the southern European countries like Italy, Portugal, Greece, Spain, who are finding themselves in financial bankruptcy because of the lockdown policies. And the bill will fall on Britain because, of course, we're the only member state technically still having to abide by EU law, yet with no voice and no veto. So our taxpayers at this point really can't afford to bail out these other countries, and we've already got our own economic recession ahead, or at least.
Well, I actually think that wouldn't actually be the case because we're not a part of the euro. And I remember in
they've already demanded money, and we've already paid them something like 85 million euros recently to deal with Corona. And that bill is going to keep growing because the only thing the EU care about is using us as their cash cow. And that's what they've been doing. That's the only reason why they don't even want us to leave. It's because we are a very economically healthy nation, or at least we were until now. And the point is they need our money because their project is collapsing. And the bill is going to fall on the taxpayers of Europe, and specifically on us, if we don't get as far away from the crash that is ahead for the Eurozone as possible.
Yeah. And even the countries in the EU are starting to ease their lockdown restrictions now. Even Germany and places like that, and Denmark, they're opening their shops up.
Yeah, and their schools as well. That's something so important that we haven't seen here, because there is virtually no science to back up house arrest or lockdown. There is no evidence to prove it's working. But I think what's even crazier is stopping children from going to school, because children do not carry COVID-19 and they don't even transmit it. They can't really transmit it. There's no evidence to suggest that they do. And obviously they're not affected by it. So, the shutting down of society has just been a failed experiment, and it's going to cause so many more problems ahead. And I don't see why it should continue now that we passed the peak as well.
Do you see a dichotomy between conservative values and liberal values? Because I actually don't see them as that opposed to each other. And in the case of Boris, he is liberal, but I would say he is conservative at the same time. Because, we could say free speech, that's a liberal value. To me, it's also a conservative value.
Well, conservative is just upholding the traditions and the values on which our country was based on. And those values are enshrined in documents such as the Magna Carta and the British Constitution. We have a Bill of Rights. And the point is, true conservatism would be upholding those documents in our Constitution. And our Constitution enshrines our civil liberties. So in reality, I suppose, of course, conservatism is being in support of our freedom and our civil liberties for that reason. But I think this kind of new liberalism that has emerged, I'm not so convinced that it's conservatism.
You wouldn't call it?
No.
You wouldn't call yourself a liberal then?
I don't know. I don't really know what I am.
Yeah.
I guess I just have different opinions which make sense to me. And some of them fall into the conservative category. Some of them, I guess, would fall into the liberal ideology. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
What would you describe yourself as?
I would call myself a full-hearted right-wing conservative.
But you're also liberal?
But I would say I'm also a liberal because I believe in free speech and the separation of church and state and all the old things, which I'm a big fan of the founding fathers of America, and those were like the perfect examples, I think, of conservative but also liberal, and maintaining freedoms, but at the same time conserving the values of America. So I would say I'm predominantly a conservative, but I would also say I'd be happy to call myself a liberal. But I understand in America the term liberal has been totally abused now,
and here too, really, as well.
Yeah, but I don't think people use the word liberal as a pejorative as they do some conservatives in America, because I don't actually think the fundamentals of actually being a liberal are actually that bad. It depends what you mean, I guess, when you say I'm liberal, because if you use it to mean you support mass immigration,
or mass murder of babies, abortion, I don't know where you stand on that, but I'm passionately pro-life.
Yeah. Did that come about through your more recent?
No, actually, I've always been pro-life before I started even thinking about politics. I always thought it was wrong, and that was even before I wanted to be Catholic. Before I found the truth faith. Well, I am now. Obviously, my baptism has been delayed, unfortunately, because of this COVID. I would have been baptized right now if COVID hadn't come along and ruined everything, and lockdown more specifically.
Yeah,
so
it's funny because
yeah.
It's funny actually because I'm actually in the process of like studying Catholicism, and
That's so
I was
cool.
going to get. Have you read the Catechism and things like that?
I have, yeah, I guess. Well, for my baptism, I've been reading lots of interesting Catholic writings, and it is the one true church, and it's the one true church of England as well. We were originally a Catholic country, and I think we should come back to that.
Yeah, because I actually did a poll in Purple Tories not long ago, and it basically said, what do you think our country needs to get back to in order to be able to reject, social justice nonsense and things like mass immigration? And pretty much the vast majority said we need to return to traditional and Christian values.
Definitely.
And I found that interesting because most people in that group, I don't think, are actually Christian, but even they believe we need to get back to a Christian moral way of living.
Of course. I mean, our law is based on Christian values, and also as our culture, and our original culture, and that's so important. And
I totally agree with you on the Catholic question, because I also posted something about this where the problem with the Anglican Church and Protestantism.
Oh, there's so many.
Yeah. Obviously, you could say, from a political perspective, the Anglican Church is terrible right now.
Yeah, it's like completely infiltrated. Because I think a lot of people are kind of off-put of Catholicism because of the institution of the Catholic Church itself, which is headed by a pope who hasn't always stood up for Catholic values or conservative values, which are basically integral to Catholicism itself. So I think that does put off a lot of people, but I think what we need to remember is that the church itself is actually the body, and who makes up the body of the church? It's us, the people. So I think that's what we need to remember, that we are the church. It's not, necessarily the institution itself, but the people who attend mass every day at a community level. So there is hope for the Catholic Church, and yes, it's been infiltrated, but the Anglican Church too has been completely infiltrated. So,
well, I would argue much worse for the Anglican Church.
Definitely.
But I think the difference is, if you look at it from a religious perspective as well, the Catholic tradition holds in much higher esteem ritual and the traditions of the Catholic Church.
And even then, our traditions are under attack. But sorry, as you were saying.
Yeah, and so I think it's more strict in its definitions of what it is, and I think Anglicanism is this much more like I don't know how you say it, a fluffy version of Christianity, which is just open infiltration.
Yeah, clearly. And if you just look at the fact that the Catholic Church was the church that Jesus set up himself 2,000 years ago, whereas the Anglican Church came about because Henry VIII wanted to divorce his wife. Yeah, that's not a very noble reason to set up a church. And you just have to remember that this is a church basically set up because some man wanted to divorce his wife. That's not true church. True church is the Catholic Church.
I'm gonna cut that clip and just post it for everyone to see. You're gonna upset a lot of Protestants.
Yeah, and remember, the most important thing, it is the true Church of England as well.
Yeah.
England as a land has been consecrated to the Virgin Mary, so we must never forget. And actually, talking about that, one of the reasons why I'm desperate for lockdown to end as well is because I want to go on a pilgrimage as soon as lockdown's over.
Really? Where to?
To Walsingham.
To Rome?
I've already planned it out. It's like about 85 miles.
Sorry, where is
from
this?
Edmondsbury. It's in Norfolk. Walsingham.
In Norfolk?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I haven't heard of this.
Yeah, not many people have actually, unfortunately, but it's
a cathedral.
No, it's the church is called Our Lady of Walsingham. It's a shrine for Our Lady.
Oh, okay. I don't know where to go from that subject now. I'm interested in that subject. I know what we can talk about. Did you see Piers Corbyn when he was protesting against the lockdown? Yeah.
Didn't actually. I know there was a protest. Is it
on
the news?
Because you've been on protest. You've been on protest with Piers before, haven't you?
Oh, Piers. Yeah. He's great.
Yeah. But did you see, I can't remember where it was in London, somewhere in central London. He actually did a protest against the lockdown.
That's amazing. Oh, I wish I could have joined him. Next time I'm definitely joining him.
Yeah. And the police threatened to arrest him, but they didn't arrest him in the end because they said you need to move, and he did end up complying with them, and he did move in the end.
Well, the thing is that right now the police are supposed to be enforcers of the law, but right now they're technically enforcing laws that don't exist. So, for example, people who are being, stopped in the park and told to go home, or being stopped from sunbathing, or even being having their bags checked after they've been to the supermarket, things like that, which are just crazy abuses of power. If you ask, on what statute are you doing this? What law exactly do you have? They can't answer you, so they can't arrest you technically, because there are no laws that can stop them. And I don't think,
I saw in Miami in Florida, they had a big beach party.
Oh yeah, I think I might have seen that.
Yeah, there was no way any authorities were going to be able to shut that down. There was just way too many people.
Yeah, exactly. I think, whenever I go to the park, there are these huge police vans that kind of roam around with microphones telling everyone to go home. And honestly, I always think there are way too many people here. If anything were to happen, I don't think the police could actually control the crowd.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And to the other Piers Morgan.
Oh no. I mean,
I don't know if you saw, but he tweeted basically. He's been tweeting ferociously for ages now about how outraged he is at the government.
Yeah, I've never, he's lost all his respect in my eyes. I just can't believe how hysterical.
You had respect for him to begin with?
Okay, well, not really. I mean, I had like a tiny bit of respect for him, and that's all gone now because he's just over emotional, he's irrational, he's fear mongering, and he's just officially lost the plot.
Well, Michael Vaughan, the ex-cricketer and presenter now, he actually tweeted him and said, "Do you really need to be tweeting all this negativity? Yeah. And it seems like you're enjoying it."
Yeah, and then, he loves it. He's loving it.
Piers Morgan replied, like, "How dare you, Michael Vaughan, like, of accusing me of this? This is atrocious what's happening." And he just basically went absolutely mental again.
Yeah, no, I think people like Piers Morgan, they were once national figures that you could trust and you could rely on, and he's just
question that.
And yeah, well,
he did used to edit the Daily Mirror, which I wouldn't really regard as top quality journalism. I mean, maybe
Good Morning Britain is such like a well-known kind of national show, and the fact that he's just completely gone hysterical over COVID, and the ratings have plummeted for his show. The reason for this, it's just purely because he's just gone crazy.
Yeah.
I think that's all there is to say about it, really. I remember tweeting ages ago, I unfollowed him and I was like, I'll follow you if you calm down. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. No.
No.
Mm-mm.
Do you, I know you used to do a little bit of work with Turning Point. Do you have any affiliations at this point? Do you write for anyone or anything like that?
I actually am still working with Turning Point. Yeah, but At the moment, no, I don't really have any kind of organizations that I'm affiliated with. I'd say even, with Turning Point, I help when I can, basically, but I'm not extensively involved.
I don't follow Turning Point, I have to admit, but have they had an opinion on the lockdown? What are they saying about that?
Honestly, I think they're just. I know they don't support the furlough scheme, and they see it as unsustainable as well. So, but other than that, I actually haven't really checked.
I support the Conservative Party, as you know, but more recently I've been trying to reach out to people who are part of conservative groups, which are either non-partisan or loosely affiliated to the Conservative Party. And there's a few interesting groups out there. I interviewed, I don't know if you've heard of the Mallards yesterday, which is an online publication.
No, I haven't.
I do think we need like some kind of way of grouping people like ourselves to be able to organize. And it doesn't have to be a political party.
No, I agree. That'd be so great. The thing is that all these organizations that keep popping up, I'd love that to be a great organization where we could all kind of come together, but I don't know, many of them have quite shady interests and you don't really know who's behind them, etc. So it's a bit difficult. But
yeah, it's a shame we don't have, like an intellectual heavyweight, whether it be someone like, Douglas Murray or Peter Hitchens. I would say Peter Hitchens, but there are certain things about Peter Hitchens I actually sometimes disagree with. I don't like the way he sometimes speaks in quite a pro-Russian way.
I don't agree with everything he says, but I think he's one of the very, few voices nowadays who are standing up for the truth and are just saying things as they are. And, I think he's great. I love him. I just remembered before this lockdown, I actually bumped into him on my way home from school. And he was really charming. He was really nice. And yeah, he's saying, I think, what a lot of people think right now about the lockdown, yet virtually no voices in the media are saying these kind of things, that there is no evidence for a lockdown. And if you're going to implement something that demands so much of our civil liberties and is basically destroying our economy, you have to have a good reason to implement the lockdown. There has to be evidence that it's helping. But there is no evidence. There is no data to suggest that the lockdown is saving any lives. And you can see this around the world because there are other countries who haven't had a lockdown, who haven't shut down society, and are doing perfectly fine with even way fewer deaths than here, like in Japan or in South Korea.
Have you... I almost forgot, you were obviously heavily involved in the Brexit Party. Obviously, since that's declined, basically, because of the Conservative sweep across the nation in the last general election. What have you made of the people that you speak to who are from the Brexit Party? Where are they now? Are they shifting more into the Conservative Party, or are they trying to go into other directions?
Yeah, I think many people have chosen to support our government and also to scrutinise their decisions if we don't think they're right. And I think that's kind of where I stand, because I am supportive of the Conservative Party generally now, I guess, because they are a government, they have a majority, our country voted for them. And as a fierce Democrat, if that's what the country wants, I'm there to kind of support and also scrutinise. So. I think really though,
membership card yet?
I do actually.
You do have it. I remember we were talking about this. I was trying to say to you that yes, the Conservative Party is not the greatest, but it's the best we have. So you've been convinced. Can I put that on my list of achievements?
Yeah, okay. I'll allow that.
You're a very tame supporter of the Conservative Party.
I don't know. Well, we'll see. At the moment, I mean, the thing is that I just would like to see more leadership from Boris, and also just more consistency in their policy. Because as I said, it makes no sense that people are allowed to enter our country from abroad, aren't being checked, aren't being stopped, aren't being quarantined, and yet we have to be under house arrest. Same with the crisis going on right now in Dover, where we're getting boats and boats of illegal immigrants who I feel really sorry for, because this is a very unpleasant situation for them as well. But the point is, we need to do something about it, and I don't see enough action from the government. We're back now. Yeah, we were talking about Rory Stewart.
Yeah. Before I got cut off, I was going to say it's quite frustrating because there's a lot of potential for this Conservative government. We have good people in place like Boris and Priti Patel, and we've also got rid of a lot of terrible people like Anna Soubry and Rory Stewart.
Yeah, Dominic Reid, all those Remainers who weren't really Conservative at all.
So if Boris really gets his act together and really implements what he's talking about, doing things for up north, which would benefit the economy, the Northern powerhouse, and actually doing solid things with immigration, it could actually be one of the great Conservative governments in recent times.
Yeah. But the first thing he has to sort out is ending this lockdown and regenerating and revitalizing our economy. Because at the moment, we have never had so many people being paid by the state, so many people who are now unemployed. Debt is rising, people's savings are dwindling on rent. And this is not a good situation. So he needs to do something about this. And I think the whole basis of the lockdown policy was to protect our NHS. And in a sense, if that was the goal, it's been achieved, because our NHS hasn't been overwhelmed. Even during the peak, it was still under capacity with spare ICU beds. So the point now is just getting back to normal life as soon as possible, whilst we can still be protecting the elderly, who are the most vulnerable from this virus.
So do you see any possibility in the future of a strong Conservative government, perhaps a new leader in the future as well, someone like Priti Patel? Do you think she might be good as Prime Minister?
Yeah, definitely. She seems really great. I do believe that the government could do something great, but I just think right now this is not a good situation. And the sooner we get back to normal, the less we will suffer the job losses, the lower wages, the cuts to public services. And, for many people in society, this lockdown is having very serious effects. And a lot of these are people who voted for the Conservative Party back in the last general election, and who voted hoping that their lives would get better. This was maybe, for a lot of people, a vote that they'd never voted for the Conservative Party before as well, especially in the north. So Boris really mustn't let down these people, and show them that he is a good leader who will make sure that our living standards increase, even in the poorest, neglected areas of the country. And I think that ending the lockdown is the first step to helping those people.
Did you hear that? I think they're talking about possibly raising tax to pay for this.
Yeah, of course. Well, they've got to pay for it some way, and the government can only get money either from borrowing it, which ultimately will, as you said, lead to higher taxes, or taxing us, basically. That's the only way the government can get money. So inevitably, taxes will rise, and that is not why we voted for a Conservative government.
Yeah. It's funny because I always try and find some kind of optimism, and you're actually the younger one here, and you're quite cynical on the whole when it comes to the whole situation.
I'm cynical now, but I still am optimistic for the future. I always have hope, because you know, even though things are really bad right now, I do believe that the British resolve is the most powerful thing, and our country's spirit is powerful. And there are people out there who you know, who are willing to fight for their freedoms and who care deeply and who are patriotic about this country. So as long as that exists, we'll be fine, and we will come out of this stronger than ever. That's what I believe.
Okay. All right. Well, we've gone on for nearly an hour there. I think maybe that's a good time to stop.
It's been really great talking, Damien. Thank you so much.
Great to speak to you too. I'm going to hang up the call, but stay on the line.
Cool, I'll do that. Bye, everyone.
All right.